San Francisco Congressman Leo Ryan flew to Guyana to investigate the allegation.
I'm very glad to be here. This is a congressional inquiry. I think that all of you know that I'm here to find out more about questions that have been raised about your operation here. But I can tell you right now that from the few conversations I've had with some of the folks here already this evening, that whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
The events of the following day would shock the world.
Love is the only weapon. Shit! Bullshit! Martin Luther King died with love. Kennedy died talking about something you couldn't even understand, some kind of generalized love, and he never even backed it up. He shut down. Bullshit! Love is the only weapon with which I got to fight. I got a hell of a lot of weapons to fight. I got my claws, I got compasses, I got guns, I got dynamite, I got a hell of a lot to fight. I'll fight, I'll fight, I will fight, I will fight, I will fight, I will fight.
Some 20 years later, Jonestown still raises as many questions as it does answers. Was it a mass suicide or a mass murder? Was it a mind control experiment gone awry? Was the CIA somehow involved? While still a teenager, Jones established a pulpit on the street corners of Richmond, Indiana, where he sold monkeys door to door in order to fund his activities. There he came to know a juvenile police officer named Dan Matron, whose improbable path Jones would cross and recross in the years ahead. By the late 1950s, Jones had married his high school sweetheart, Marceline, and established an interracial church based in Indianapolis. He called it the People's Temple. At first, the church prospered, but Jones had a secret life. Matron left Richmond and joined a sometime CIA cover at the State Department. Coincidentally or not, Jones suddenly became of deep interest to the most clandestine department of the agency, whose activities included mind control experiments, attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, and operations to infiltrate and disrupt black organizations. For reasons that the CIA has always refused to explain, they opened a secret file in Jones' name. Suddenly, Jones abandoned his church, and armed with 2 passports, the young charismatic preacher traveled to a series of political hotspots: Mexico, Cuba, Guyana, and Brazil. Though he spoke no Portuguese, in 1962, Jones moved to Belo Horizonte, a small town in Brazil. With no apparent means of support, he rented an expensive house and began to make in-depth studies into voodoo, faith healing, mass conversion, and ESP, a key investigative element of the CIA's mind control program. But Jones was not the only person there from Richmond, Indiana. He later bragged of visits to his neighbor, Dan Matron. The former police chief was now working for a sometime CIA cover at the U.S. consulate, training Brazilian police in the subtleties of hostile interrogation. Jones was also contacted by another key member of American intelligence at that time, John Lodison, who'd been kicked out of the Soviet Union for spying. In Brazil, he met with Jones for reasons that the CIA still refuses to explain. But Jones' stay in Brazil did not last. He left the country soon after a newspaper article appeared claiming he was a CIA agent. Returning to the USA, Jones moved the People's Temple to Northern California, where its membership grew rapidly.
Jones flourished in San Francisco's cult-worshipping atmosphere. Membership in his People's Temple swelled to nearly 20,000 as his reputation grew, and he started food kitchens and daycare centers. He particularly targeted minorities. Believing that the ends justified the means, he put on fake displays of healing and said that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ.
What's your snide about every number? You asked and begged and pleaded for help with your suffering, and he never gave you any food. He never provided a bed. He never gave you a home. But I, the socialist worker God, have given you all those things. Stop sick. And you won't die if you trust me. You will die if you stand up. You will die if you jump up and down. Because I am freedom. I am peace. I am justice. I am equality. I am God.
Using classic brainwashing techniques, he bound his followers to him so that they willingly gave him whatever property and money they had.
Can't imagine talking some privacy. You know, the most discriminated against perhaps of any group. I really don't feel comfortable with our worship being photographed. I really don't. I must go against the entire council. I don't feel good about it. They can photograph me all they choose, because I do not care. I'm fearless. I come unafraid of anything, but I don't want the cameras focusing on others. I don't want them. Focus on me all you want. I owe something to my people, and that's to be a good pastor, and that I am, the best I am.
His services were dazzling affairs, with soul and gospel singers, dance groups, and celebrity preachers like black revolutionary Angela Davis. The size of his congregation gave him a political power base. During the 1976 presidential election campaign, he allegedly provided support for the Democrats and met the presidential candidate's wife. Local politicians sought his support, and he became a member of the city's housing commission.
People from all walks of life were just fascinated by Jim Jones. I mean, I remember going to a testimonial dinner. Who was there at the dinner? You got Angela Davis, the communist, and then you have Walter Heady, the chairman of the John Birch Society. And then you had the lieutenant governor of the state of California, you had the mayor, you had the DA, you had the chief of police, you had the supervisors, you had businessmen. They were all there at this meeting, and I thought, Jim, you got your act
He'd
together.
bring all of these people in, and he himself would come in the midst of a smaller a retinue of aides. They'd shoo him to the front of the room, put him on the center of the chair, and basically sort of guard him the whole time. Guys in dark glasses, black suits, the whole thing. It was very unusual.
Jonestown was in its fourth year when Jones arrived in 1977. Conditions had never been easy, but when he took over, the agricultural mission became a labor camp.
Jim had armed guards. I mean, young men and women who were told that they needed to watch everybody, and it kept you working hard. We headed out to the fields, and you vied to go really far out, actually, because you couldn't hear Jim over the loudspeakers.
Jonestown was wired with loudspeakers, and Jim spoke 24 hours a day on it. When he wasn't speaking, the tapes that they'd made of him speaking played on and on and on.
And Jim would make these announcements, and he'd say, I'm sending out some children and some of my aides and other people you won't know who they are to pretend they want to leave. And it's a test, it's a loyalty test. And if anyone comes to you, you're to report them.
You didn't know who it would be, so you just never put the place down, and how much you enjoyed it there, how much you loved the place, and how great he was, and how Father was so nice, and you had to call him Father. You just never said anything bad about the place, because if you did, you would be coming up there that night.
They also told of full-scale rehearsals for mass suicide in the jungle.
I'll talk to psychiatrists, whatever, but I believe I was brainwashed.